I am very deeply honored to be here because we know it's not that easy to break this spiral of silence and speak up. So we all know that we don't really care how people live their lives sexually, how they want to be socially. We actually the smallest of any minority is the individual. So whoever or whatever they want to live their lives, we should respect that. And this is not about how people want to live their lives. This is about sports. And the most solid pillar in sports is the biological pillar, not the social pillar, how people decide to live their lives. So with that said, I really want to thank you, all of brave women, to come together and fight for women's rights, and especially for girls, young girls that here in United States, they are in deep trouble with this transgender policy. I have a daughter, she's 15 years of age, and she's just getting into high school, and she's a volleyball player as well. And she wants to train hard to try to get a scholarship in a good college here in US. And every time we see these cases around the globe, around the US, I talk to her, and she often questions me, but Anna, she's my stepdaughter, but Anna, what if a boy takes my place? What if a boy takes my place? What about all the work that I put in? And it's very sad. And every time I see Selena on the screen, I get really emotional because that girl is a warrior, is a fighter, and we should fight. Like Beth said, one is already too many. So I want to talk. I'm happy I didn't put my presentation up because Beth had a lot covered of what I have in my presentation. But I do want to talk about my experience as an Olympic athlete and how I was watched during my entire career about substances in my body. My first doping control test, I was 16 years of age. So since I started to play volleyball professionally when I was 16, when I joined the national team, the junior national team, and I retired when I was 38. And during all those decades, I was heavily watched and rightfully watched because we want to be in a clean sports on and off competitions. I remember my last 4 or 5 years, I was already here living in LA. During those five last years of my career, I had the doping control WADA knocking on my door at 6 a.m. off competitions so I could get tested. Because we all know that if there's a substance in sports that everybody wants to have in your body, it's testosterone. We know the benefits of that. Whoever who has increased level of testosterone in your body, that could be a game changer in any sports. In fact, I had teammates in the past, women, that first of all, we needed to take a gender test. We used to have it's called the pink card. So we needed to take a gender test. And so in order to compete. But then later on, when a girl would have kind of a bigger or better performance in sports, they will go further and take a blood test. And if the level of testosterone was a little bit higher, that girl who had taken the gender test had to lower their testosterone because even the natural testosterone was way too much. So I had teammates in the past that had to take suppressants because their level of testosterone was too high for a woman. So what do we do now? How do we look back and look at those women and we say, well, I'm sorry, you have to be suspended for a year or two because your level of testosterone was too high? How do we look at them now and say, yeah, we were unfair, but now we're accepting biological male with their bodies full of testosterone for decades. There's back to my life as an athlete. We have to go to the WADA website for those who don't know how that works, and we have to feel aware about, which means you have to let them know way in advance where you're going to be every single day of the year. You can go and change if you travel, you can go and change, but you need to let them know where you're going to be for 1 hour so they can find you any day of the year and test you on and off competitions. And if you're not there where you said you were going to be, you can get suspended. By the third time that they can't find you, you get suspended and you can't play your sports anymore. Just like Beth showed, I am often called transphobe on social media, but I think now they're stopping to do that because we've been in this fight together for over 3 years now, and they realized that we're not going to stop. We're going to continue to protect women's rights, and with science, with biology. So I have a lot of people that they don't like me anymore as a person or as a public figure. But when it comes to protecting women, now they're starting to understand and they're starting to support me. Tiffany, for instance, I want to bring her case specifically because Tiffany, she is now being considered to join the national team, the women's national team. Tiffany, when she was a male player, she used to play volleyball in the male league. And she wasn't a great player. He wasn't a great player as Rodrigo. And now she changed genders. Now she's Tiffany and she's playing in the women's league. And now she's one of the best players and even considered to be in the national team. My question to authorities in Brazil is, what happens to that girl that, like me, was tested since she was 16 and went through the whole process of being tested her entire life, and now by the age of 25, 26, she's going to lose her spot in the women's national team to a biological male that during the entire puberty, because Tiffany changed her gender when she was 30. So by the age of 30, Tiffany already had her body structure completely, and like Beth said, one girl out of the place that she needed to be, she deserves to be, she earned to be. It's too many. That's one big problem that I'm facing in Brazil, because some states, they want to pass bills, just like Idaho here in the United States. They want to pass bills that protect women, and we're having a big fight in Brazil. Like São Paulo wants to pass a bill. They want a federal bill as well. I've been to the Senate, I've been to the House, to the Congress in Brazil, discussing this, presenting all of this, and people are starting to understand. And there's another side for me that it's so scary to see this door opening. And like Beth said, it can be like a floodgate, because we know that in Olympic sports, people, audience in general, they have this image of or imagination that Olympic sports, everything is pretty, everything is nice, everything is honest. And we know it's not. We know there is a big battle to win medals, to make money. Like, for instance, in 2016 in the Olympics in Brazil, the entire Federation of Russia of athletics, track and field, they were banned because they were using substances. I think there's another door that I can see federations using boys to make the transition, because now the rule is no surgery is required, right? You just need to lower your testosterone for 1 year, and then you are completely able to compete with women. So I do fear that some federations will use boys in order to compete in the Olympics, and then they can transition back to being boys or whatever. And my sport is volleyball. It's 1 in 6 that are playing. But what about those individual sports, swimming and track and field? Also, what worries me is that it's the silence of athletes, which I understand they are competing, but my phone is constantly flooded with messages from girls in Brazil that are currently playing, but sponsors are not allowing them to talk. They are being threatened of taking ripping their sponsors out of them if you say anything. So it feels like the mob is really loud. I think we are the majority when we present facts like Beth did. That's what I have in my presentation in the Congress: biology, biology. And when people see that, they can't unsee what we present. So I wish we could have, and this is I'm leaving here to the women in this panel. Maybe we should put a package together for those women who they don't want to be out there speaking with their names on the screen, but they have a package to present, like a biological package, a scientific package that shows all the transformation in women's body, in men's body, especially like we have great data from the U.S. track and field and swimming federations showing that there's already a big gap between boys and girls when they're 6 years of age. It starts right there, and this gap gets bigger and bigger and bigger. When they're 12, 13, 14, this gap is bigger, and then it gets a little smaller when they're 17, but then it gets bigger again. So we need to, I think here we also, I'll leave the seed here for us to discuss further. We need to provide these women a good material, good sources for them to understand that this is not about your social choices, but it's about biology, which is the strongest pillar in sports. My presentation, the presentation that I had for the Brazilian Congress was pretty wild. We were there for 7 hours discussing policies, and Tiffany was there as well with her team. And when we were discussing back and forth, the only word that we heard from their side was inclusion, inclusion, inclusion. And from our side was science, science, science. And we need to understand that this kind of inclusion of trans athletes in the women's sports, it's the exclusion of women. This is not inclusion of trans people, it's the exclusion of biological women that are in their right field. We have to also mention the letter of the Baron of Coubertin that he wrote in his Olympic letter that we need to protect women and we need to protect women's sports. We are simply tearing his Olympic letter, Olympic chart, and just throwing it in the trash and say, forget about all of you wrote in the past. We're just gonna implement something that completely out of your science, out of the Olympic field. One last point that I want to briefly leave here is that about the doping control that we have to go through. Let's say, for an instance, if I was still playing today, we need to keep in mind that WADA and the doping control agencies, they keep your B sample for 10 years, just in case they want to retest you. So let's say if I'm still playing and for some reason they want to retest my B sample from 8 years ago. So they go back and they take this B sample, they test. If they find a minimal extra trace of testosterone in my B sample, I am either banned or suspended from a sample that it's from 8 years ago. But my question is, what a sample from a trans athlete from 8 years ago who just completely the transition would show. It will show a high level of testosterone. So this policy is completely unfair to young girls that are getting into a women's sport, but also the Olympic athletes that we have been watched for decades not to use the minimum substance that it's not legal in sports. So this is completely unfair, and we need to always keep remember the world. This inclusion, this fake inclusion, it's the exclusion, total exclusion of women.